I've been born with that kind of mindset where I'll have these goals. As soon as it's achieved, I'm already looking forward to the next thing, and it literally is never ending. And it's very hard to be sort of happy with where you are. What I want out of life is so big, it's so much that you can't ever probably can't ever even reach it. But it's such a balancing act of how do I try and enjoy what's in front of me as well a little bit more. The realization is there is no end point, and I've got to just keep reeling it back in and reminding myself, even though the mind tells you that no, if I just achieve this thing then I'll feel different. It's like, no, you never will. But it's also great, it's a gift to have it. So just having that gift, but then on a daily or sometimes moment by moment basis, being able to have the self-awareness that, okay, it's okay though to, yep, great, I'm going through all this stuff, but I'm also going to remind myself that that's not the answer. I'm going to try and achieve it, but the answer is that there is no answer, and just enjoying, the process of it all.
Hi, I'm the self-development coach, Johnny Lawrence, and welcome to the Self-Development Podcast. In today's episode, I'll be speaking with Nick Bracks. Nick's early career in the fashion and entertainment industries ultimately led him to his ongoing work in mental health awareness. He earned international modeling contracts and made regular appearances on Australian television. During this time on Dancing with Stars, Nick publicly spoke about his experience with depression and anxiety for the first time. Nick has advocated alongside some of Australia's largest mental health focused organizations by candidly recounting the mental health issues he struggled with since 11 years old. He has presented 2 TED Talks, one covering the growing suicide epidemic. One of Nick's creative outlets is acting, including a 2-year role on the Australian soap Neighbours. Nick's passion for mental health and well-being places a strong emphasis on helping people find focus, deal with stress, re-energize, and be mindful through meditation. Nick, how are you today, mate?
I'm going well, mate. And I've got to say, we were just talking before about, reading introductions and how we both, struggle with that. And you were flawless there, not one stuff up. It was really good. So I was super impressed. You set the bar, but you did it well.
I don't know, mate. I've got judgments on it. I really do.
Well, I mean, probably one of the things we'll talk about today as well. We all judge ourselves, don't we? We all I'm my own worst enemy. If someone sort of had an insight into what's going on in my head and the self-talk every day, it'd be horrifying. But I'd never say the same thing to someone else or someone I care about. But it's funny, isn't it? The stuff that goes on in our heads.
It is. I mean, I'm a self-confessed recovering perfectionist. It's hard work. But even that, do you ever find that you try to be a perfectionist at not being a perfectionist?
100%. It's like I was talking about this, I think 2 days ago with someone, and it's like you try and then build these positive habits and things to, find balance, and then you obsess about those, and then that loses the whole purpose of why you were doing it. And it's just like, okay, I should just fucking give up.
That's right. No, you're right. I mean, it's funny just speaking to what you just said there about what goes on in your head. And it's like a lot of the work that I do with clients, and I'm sure you find it the same way, is that people don't just want to be able to like outwardly be a certain way. They want to feel that way too. And I'm not sure that's always possible. I think sometimes you're always going to have those doubts in your mind. Sometimes you're going to have those questions you ask yourself and that imposter syndrome, those limiting beliefs, but you're going to do it anyway, because I remember seeing an interview with Dwayne Johnson. Now, Dwayne Johnson, I don't care what you measure him on. He's a very successful man. And he talks about all of the insecurities he has about what he does. And you're like, really? But it just shows you he still does it, right? It's just sometimes he might be a bit nervous or he might not be sure and all those sort of things. So I think it's really important to know, I think, that you might not always feel like it, but you can do it,
I really like that point, because that's the thing. I think it sort of feeds into that whole thing of, there's no destination that we're going to arrive at where everything's okay and we're going to finally feel good. Or if we, have these lofty goals and, we'll finally be enough when we get there. It's not how it works, because you're still the same person. And, even if you reach Dwayne Johnson's level, like you're saying there, he's still, that becomes the new normal for him. Humans, we're very adaptable. We're built to adapt, as we've seen in COVID and things like that. So you get to that level, then you're like, okay, like this is normal though. What's special about this? I've got to now do the next thing, unless you can realize that. And it's so hard to do, but I think it's there's liberation in realizing that okay, I'm gonna some of these, feelings and thoughts I have, they're going to be there forever, and that's okay. I'm just don't have to buy into them all, and give ourselves permission to enjoy life right now rather than waiting for a theoretical, time to do it.
I love that. Give yourself permission to enjoy life right now. That's a really lovely way of saying it. I really like that, because I think in most cases, in all cases, you can't go back and change things. You might be able to build bridges, or you might be able to frame it in a nicer way, or change the perspective. But ultimately, all you can really do is cultivate acceptance. You just want to accept what's happened. I say a lot to people, all you can do is change the perspective from which you're looking at it. You can take a 6 and turn it into a 9 just by changing the way you look at it, but you can't actually make it a 9, if that makes sense. So anyway, look at us. We hit the ground running.
Yeah, there we go. We're straight into it.
People are like, whoa, lads, give us a second to get in there.
I know, let's just chill out. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's it now, guys. Thanks for listening.
Yep.
No, but I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of you, watched your work. But if you wouldn't mind telling people a bit about yourself and your absolutely remarkable journey so far, that would be wonderful.
Okay, well, I wouldn't say it's that remarkable, but in addition to what you read out, I guess that's a pretty good summary. I've been in the mental health space for the past, or a bit over 10 years, and I fell into it. So I grew up in a well-known family in Australia. My dad was a very prominent politician, so he was the head of the state, basically. Premier of Victoria is what it's called. So he was in that position from when I was 12 till my early 20s. So I'd sort of grown up with our family being very well known, having a very well known father, being in the shadow of my father, and I've got great parents, and they've never put pressure on us. But it led to me, because of my personality, I'm naturally very ambitious, and as you were saying before about yourself, I'm naturally very much a perfectionist and take everything to the extreme and want to milk everything out of myself. And it just added to that, where I just felt inadequate, and was known my whole life as anyone I'd meet, hey, you're the son of this person, and it was actually in the media and all that sort of thing. And I channeled all of that angst into wanting to be a professional athlete, and competed at a really high level. Initially in our Australian rules football, which is our sort of national game, and then middle distance running, because I became so fit and I was competing at an Australian level, and essentially just running myself into the ground, training 6-7 hours a day as a 12-year-old kid, and
wow.
Led to a whole lot of things. And I'd my whole life I'd had issues with OCD, overthinking, anxiety, and didn't know how to manage it, didn't know what was going on. And I guess exercise and sport became my way to cope, because you could sort of gain popularity through that. I could channel all of this extreme thinking into something, and it was my only outlet from my mind, really, without really knowingly doing it. And but anyway, it was training myself into the ground. Didn't really fit in, wouldn't socialize with anyone. I was incredibly shy, and it went on for years. And eventually my body broke down. It stunted my physical development. I didn't hit puberty till I was 16, 17. Didn't socially develop, and finished up at high school and couldn't do this one thing that I'd built my whole identity on. Couldn't socialize with people, couldn't look someone in the eye, couldn't, hold a conversation more than, 1 or 2 words. I was afraid of my own shadow. And that was really when problems began. I sort of finished at school, did a gap year actually in the UK, and just wasn't coping, came home, dropped out of university, and started for the first time in my life, I actually, started using alcohol quite late in life, but it went from not using it all to just absolute abuse to, an extreme level. And, too many stories to sort of recount. But if I look back, I genuinely feel fortunate that I actually am here today, because there was just life-threatening things happening all the time, and a car crash that I was very lucky to survive, and one of my best friends almost, we both probably should have been killed, is what the police said that when that happened. So all these different things happening, and it was becoming a media circus around it. And anyway, long story short, eventually I started to get myself back on track, and just took baby steps, and that led to going back to university, initially getting asked to do some modeling work, at becoming a big media thing, being on reality shows and Dancing with the Stars and different things, and getting a lot of attention through that, and then channeling all of that into helping in mental health. And that gave me a platform to talk about it, and led me down a path I never thought I would have gone down. I like sort of, couldn't speak one-on-one with people. And then I was doing these, running seminars and doing a whole lot of things like that. And it led to what I do today, and led me to get into acting as well. And, did a role on Neighbours for a couple of years, which I know is actually more popular in the UK than Australia. Even it just finished recently, but anyway, the whole lot of other things I did in between, but it led me on that path, and made me like probably more motivated than I ever could have been to just try and get these messages out to people. Because if I look at my own life, I would have, laughed at someone if they told me 10 years ago that I would have made a career doing this stuff, because I just thought, no, that's not possible. I can't do that. That's not me. But it wasn't that it wasn't me. It was I had told myself such strong stories for such a long time that I believed the crap I was feeding myself. And it took extreme things to break out of it. Like I'd be vomiting before talking in front of 5 people at university and have it written out word for word, and be mumbling, and I may as well have been speaking a different language. But I had to do it because I was sort of had been in a hole for so long, and I had to just do something. And that very slowly taught me, okay, like my worst fear is almost happening here. I'm fucking up this talk, and nothing bad's actually happening. And then, it gets to a point where you do enough of that stuff that you realize, okay, I don't have to actually listen to these thoughts in my head. It doesn't, it's not controlling what I might still have the thought. I might still have a yuck emotion attached to it, but I don't have to listen to that. I can actually choose. I've got the power to do what I want to do, even if there's discomfort. And anyway, led me down the path that I'm on today. And now I run a company called Move Your Mind, where I've got a podcast, book. We have the core company. We run wellbeing and mental health programs in organizations, and sort of what I do.
I mean, what a wonderful example of how you can completely change things. I mean, the way you described things early on for you, how you felt anyway, to what you've managed to achieve is just amazing, absolutely amazing. And I'd mentioned to 1 or 2 people, Hannah, mutual friend Hannah Wallace being one of them, that I was going to be speaking to you. And from watching you and on YouTube and through your social media, there is a sort of genuine authenticity about you that I really admire. Like for somebody that's had the success that you've had, you might not see it that way, but I do, and many others do. But for someone that's had the success that you've had, your humbleness and your authenticity is genuine, really genuine. Like there's a lot of people out there, unfortunately, and I'm sure you've met them, might even know a few, that make the claims that they want to help people. But that's not really potentially what's going on. It's more of an attention seeking, maybe, or something else. I don't know. But that's not what I see when I talk to you. It's all very genuine. And some of the stuff that you do that you don't talk about very much, I had to dig real deep to find out about. Some of the talks that you've done and some of the opportunities that you've created for people is just amazing. So I wonder, though, I do, like with the perfectionism, do you allow yourself to be proud of yourself?
And I appreciate it, mate. But yeah, I very rarely allow myself to be proud of myself. I do.
Yeah.
And I try to do it more regularly. And I sort of am happy with, what I've done. And I guess a lot of it has been, around that, originally actually around trying to get answers myself, and wanting to genuinely help other people, but also, from the perspective as well of this is helping me a lot by talking about it. It's helping me understand myself and other people. And, I always talk about that. I think it's important to find that sweet spot where how can I help others, but also, look at it from that selfish perspective in the sense of I'm getting a lot out of this as well. But I also agree with, and I've seen it happen probably the last like 3 or 4 years where, because mental health has become such a big thing, you've got all these tech entrepreneurs and different people just looking at it in a very sort of black and white way. How can I capitalize on
Opportunistic.
this area? And there's some good products out there, but there's also, a lot of crap, and a lot of people trying to just look at, the commercial side of a trend. And because this is a big talked about thing now, And then as soon as there becomes a bigger thing they can capitalize on, they'll probably move out of that space. So I think it's good to be aware of, okay, what is the quality out there? And I only say that because I think just for anyone listening to this, Evan, that is wanting to get help, it's like finding the right solutions and, realizing there's no right or wrong way, and it's a complicated area, and there's no quick fix solution either. And so if someone's presenting some shiny sort of thing in front of you and saying this is going to be solve all your problems, probably run a million miles when you hear that. But anyway, I'm going off
no,
on a tangent
speaking,
there.
No, you're speaking to someone that absolutely agrees. I mean, social media is a tricky one. There's so much value in social media. It is essentially got so many great uses. You can raise awareness about things that people have never heard about. You can raise money. You can do all sorts of things. But it's also a great place for companies to really create insecurities and then sell you the answer. And that's what's often difficult. That's what's often difficult for someone like you, for someone that I would like to believe I am, who is genuinely trying to help somebody. And actually we have these products, we have these methods, these things that we're excited that we've learned because they've helped us so much. We're trying to pass them along, but people aren't paying any attention sometimes, or maybe it's a bit more difficult because this company's got, I don't know, $1 million budget and they're pumping it into social, so it is really, really difficult. But one of the words I picked up on there when you was talking was ambition. And I know for myself, ambition is a gift and a curse in some way. I love being ambitious. It's who I am. I can't help that, but it's often a curse. Sometimes I wish I could just be happy with what is, instead of constantly going, okay, what's next? Sometimes it feels a bit like a curse. And I remember somebody asking me, what do I want? And I wasn't truthful for a really long time, because actually what I wanted was, and this sounds awful, but power and influence. And people say power and influence. Well, that sounds, because straight away it casts this image of like, oh, you're a bad person. You want power. You want to control people, But actually what I mean is I want the power to be able to, if I see something I'm not happy with, homelessness or a charity that needs supporting, I want the power to be able to do that. I want the power to be able to influence people to help themselves, because that's what we are as coaches or as people advocating for mental health. We are trying to get people to do things that they find difficult. That is influencing. They might want to be happier or more confident, and they're not that naturally. So therefore they would come to someone like yourself to be influenced. But it just doesn't sound right, does it? But I mean, how do you feel about the word ambition?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, and I guess like that's probably another thing with what you had asked me before about, am I proud of what I've done and that kind of thing. I've been born with that kind of mindset where I'll have these goals. As soon as it's achieved, I'm already looking forward to the next thing, and it literally is never ending. And it's very hard to be sort of happy with where you're at when you've got, and what I want out of life is so big, it's so much that you can't ever probably can't ever even reach it. But it's such a balancing act, and I still haven't found the answer, or I don't think there is an answer, or the balance of how do I try and enjoy what's in front of me as well a little bit more. I'm getting better at it, but I find it really difficult because I'm always just thinking about, well, we only have a certain amount of time on the planet. There's all these things I want to do, and same as you, I want power and influence for that reason. I want to succeed. I mean, the two areas I've sort of realized probably 8 years ago that I really wanted to focus on for my whole life were helping in mental health and building my career in the entertainment industry, and finding a way to blend the two together. And, the bigger I can grow in my own personal platform, the more influence I can have in reaching other people, and then ultimately helping in mental health. So it all sort of goes hand in hand, but it's hard to find the balance. And I've got a mentor in Australia who had said to me, he had the same sort of thing, and he's worth in the hundreds of millions now, and does a huge amount of philanthropic work, and really well respected, does amazing stuff. And he's in his 70s now, and he said to me that at the age he's at now, he doesn't feel any more content or at peace than he did at 18 when he had nothing. And he said the lesson he learned, maybe 20 years ago was, okay, I'm never going to lose this thing. That's fine. No matter what happens, I'm going to always want and want to push and the next challenge, because it's you're adventurous, you've got that sort of ambition, but the realization is there is no endpoint, and I've got to just keep reeling it back in and reminding myself, even though the mind tells you that no, if I just achieve this thing then I'll feel different. It's like, no, you never will, but it's also great, it's a gift to have it. So just having that gift, but then on a daily or sometimes moment by moment basis, being able to have the self-awareness that, okay, it's okay though to, yep, great, I'm going through all this stuff, but I'm also going to remind myself that that's not the answer. I'm going to try and achieve it, but the answer is that there is no answer, and just enjoying, the process of it all. But I don't think there's any perfect way to do that, but I think it's something, I think having the awareness is probably the, more than half of it.
Yeah, absolutely. The awareness. And there's a word that you use there that was brilliant. Practice. It is just practicing. And again, it might not feel natural, but you have to practice that, because otherwise you drive yourself nuts. I mean, I would have done anything 5 years ago to be where I am now. But now I'm here, I'm like, oh, well, I want to be over there. It's just like you say, it's never good enough, And it's not that I'm not grateful. I am grateful. I'm super grateful. But like you said, and I've never heard it said that way, but you're right. You're here such a short time. It's like, come on. I need to get on with it. I want to help this person. I want to help that person, And it's like I say, it's a gift and a curse, man. It really is. And it sounds like what I love as well, again, speaking to your humbleness, is that you say, I'm still working on it. I'm still trying.
And I don't think that we ever can stop, learning, or there's no sort of end point, or, I think if you stop learning and growing, or you feel like you've gotten to a point where you've mastered everything, that's when you sort of, when you die, because it's like, you can't, it's not an end point with anything, and there shouldn't be. Yeah. And I think society's tried to condition us that there is, and they tell us, the traditional thing that if you just go and get a good education and buy a house, get married, have a family, tick all these boxes, then you can be happily ever after. It's like, well, number one, even if I want those things, that's not going to be the solution to being happy. And maybe I don't fucking want it. And a lot of people probably don't. And why don't we take the time to just learn, how we want to actually live our lives? But yeah, there is, that is the reality. It's like, I thought I had a moment about a year ago when I'm living in New York at the moment, and won the green card lottery a couple of years ago. And had sort of, I remember 5 years ago, specifically saying to someone, it was before I started my podcast, and I was sort of at a different stage of what I was doing. And I was saying, in a few years' time, or, 10 years' time, I want to be living in Soho in New York, in an apartment, and running a podcast from there, and, doing all my acting and running, having that lifestyle. And it happened way quicker, and I was actually there, and I rented this apartment. I'm like, oh, it actually is in the area I said, and I'm running the podcast. I didn't even realize, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. But then that lasted for maybe 5 minutes. I was like, yeah, who gives a crap? Like, what's next? Why the hell is my podcast not blowing up? Why aren't things going better? Why is this not happening? I want my TV show made. I want more acting work. My life's a failure.
Look how quickly that happens, though. And that's why I always say to people, you can think your feelings into a problem. It starts with an initial feeling, and before you know it, you're like, what's the point? It's like you do that in almost 2-3 steps, I don't know. It's like I had someone a little while ago, they were lonely, and they went from I am lonely to I don't have any friends, no one likes me, what's the point? So they went from I am lonely to what's the point in record time. And it's terrifying. And that's how easy that happens, right?
Oh, it can happen so fast. And I had a realization not that long, probably start of this year, where, I mean, I've got really good people around me, and they're all trying to help. But because of how my mind is, the worst thing I can do is try and, I talk and try and intellectualize things too much. And, for me, it's like communication's everything. And I want to analyze, and, I'm thinking and plotting and strategizing. So the worst thing for me,
we're not related. I do worry. I
know, it sounds like we've got the similar thing, but so the worst thing for me when I'm in that kind of state, and I'm thinking, yeah, but I'm overwhelmed, I can't do this, what about this, what if this happens? And I would talk to friends or mentors and people that are just have my best interest at heart, but they'd be saying, oh yeah, and blah, blah, and entertaining the conversation. And what I noticed when I looked back was every time and not because they're doing anything wrong, they're just trying to help, but because they're entertaining the conversation, I'd go deeper into trying to intellectualize this thing that can't be talked about. It's like, okay, I don't have the answer. Like, we're going to keep trying. Talking about it won't help. So I realized, okay, I spent so many hours, talking about these things to people and just making me feel worse. I realized that's not for me. For other people, it might be, but I know for how my mind is, the answer was, all right, maybe have a quick conversation. Yep, don't have the answer. You know what? Maybe I feel off today. I'm just going to do my best. And what can I achieve today? That's it. I don't know. And boom, just cut the whole thing off, because otherwise it just does go into this tangent where you feel horrible, you can't think clearly, and it takes a bit of time to, get out of that sort of thought and feeling.
Yeah, because we build that narrative off our emotion that we're experiencing. And if we're not careful, we build this narrative off of something that really wasn't true. It was just a fleeting feeling, and that can be really, really difficult. Have you ever heard of something called philosophical loneliness?
I haven't heard of that.
No, it's an idea that, you can be lonely even amongst people. And what that is that people like you and I, it sounds like we're very similar. We want to have these very deep, exciting to us conversations about philosophy, psychology, and people and behavior and stuff. And most people don't want to, and that's not wrong or right. It's just most people want to talk about reality TV or just normal things. And you can feel quite lonely. You can be in a room full of people and feel silenced because no one wants to have those conversations. And it's quite difficult to find lunatics like us around, isn't it? It's quite hard to get out.
It's so true. And I haven't heard the term, but I'm going to have to write that down, because I have that experience a lot of the time. And I've had so many times where I've been at an event or around a group of people where, and like you said, it's not right or wrong, but the way they're conversing, and even, I'm highly sensitive, and if I'm around, loud noises and chaos, and, I'll get overwhelmed. And when people are just talking at you, but not having the time to actually have a thoughtful conversation, I find it excruciating. I'm like, well, what you just asked me a question that actually is quite detailed. I'm trying to answer it, and your eyes are darting. You're changing the subject. You're fucking bored. You're needing that next hit of stimulus. It's like, okay, I can't. I'd rather not. And I'll feel more lonely in that situation than actually sitting in a room alone. Because I quite like being alone. You then have the time. Well, because you can be creative. You can think. You can. You can't do that. So it's a tricky one to navigate. But I think, again, it's understanding yourself and really accepting that and not trying to change it. And I've sort of known that about myself for a long time, but probably wasn't respectful enough to myself with the boundaries I would set, how I'd live my life, even dating. I sort of wasn't really thinking about it, about okay, is this person though the right match? And now I'm like with had met this girl last year, and she's like on that level, just so similar, and it's just made the relationship so much easier. I'm just like, oh, we're always saying to each other, hey, hang on, it shouldn't be this easy. Like, relationships aren't meant to be this easy, because it's like, if there's a problem, we talk about it. We're just like, okay, and this is how I feel, and we have the same, like what you're saying with you, when you meet people that do think the way that I think both of us do, it's just like, oh, well, okay, like, we don't really have to, this is like easy and enjoyable. Like, it's like,
this has got potential to be.
You get used to feeling sort of unheard sometimes when you're just around people that think differently.
Yeah, that's it. Unheard and silenced. You feel like you can't speak about these things because you're almost, I suppose the word is shamed. There's an element of feeling shamed to it, isn't it? It's like, look, I get told all the time I overthink things, and I've got a very close mentor of mine. He says, well, you never really know if something's been overthought till it's over. And I love that, because he's right. Like, until it's completely over, did you overthink it? Or were you just trying to stay one step ahead of it? Were you being thorough? What was going on? But overthinking, basically, to me, is when someone says that to you, it's just that I don't have the capacity or maybe the willing to understand what you're saying or care, and
100%.
Yeah. And that's okay. But it's quite embarrassing, right? When you look at someone, you're like, wow, you checked out about 5 minutes ago and I didn't notice.
Yeah, totally. But I love that point that you're saying there, because like that's the thing. And it's like, I tried for so long to, change myself, and I still meditate and do things like that, but I was like, okay, I've I think too much. I've got to change this,
I
and
should
I've
be
got to
like this. Yeah.
I should be
Yeah.
this. And even with the acting, I was like, well, a lot of actors, you got to be so present, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, actually, you know what? Like some of them are like we are, whatever. But it just, you get told that. And I know so many in it, I've got amazing parents and nothing bad about them. But, a lot of the time I'd be saying to my mom, I'm like, Mom, I'm worried about this thing. Or, like what you're saying in your example. And she's like, well, you just got to toughen up and stop thinking like that and blah, blah, blah. And doing it, from their own understanding of how they see the world. But
That's exactly it. Their own understanding. You're absolutely right.
and it would cause, and it causes this huge angst because you're like, okay, like now I do feel shame because I can't do it the way they're saying. And there's this lack of connection because they can't understand you. And rightly or wrongly, if you think the way, like what we're talking about, you can't change it, and you shouldn't have to, but you need to become sort of comfortable enough to be able to, even when people are telling you that you should do things differently or shouldn't do this or shouldn't think like that, to be like, okay, you know what, that's okay, that's their view, but I'm going to do it regardless of whether anyone understands me or not. This is my path.
Yeah, and I feel like you probably are very similar in this context too, is that I'm okay if someone doesn't agree with me. I love listening to other people's opinions and thoughts on things, and I don't need them to think the same way with me as me, agree with me. But as part of the problem now, that hate's getting generated so easily because people don't like what you're thinking. They believe that they're right and that you should think the same way as them. And I think that's a shame because I think the world wouldn't be what it is today, good or bad, if it didn't have people thinking slightly differently to other people. There'd be a lot less of the things that we love, our phones and TV shows and what that. Imagine all the books would be the same, all of the TV shows would be the same. It'd be really, life would, every life experience would be the same, but I think a lot of the hate gets brought up from people just thinking that you should agree with them and shouldn't deviate from the plan and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, something you were talking about there was about people not fitting in and thinking that they should change themselves. But I often wonder, I hear a lot of people that talk about how they didn't fit in at school, they don't fit in at work, and they often feel like they don't fit in life at all. I mean, do you think it is that they don't fit in, or do you think that we're working with a sort of antiquated notion of how environments are set up? Like over here in the UK, I'm not sure the school system is set up for the way things are now. For example, when it was invented, there was no such thing as social media. They're preparing people for job. They can't prepare people for the jobs that are coming up because they didn't exist when it was made. So I wonder, is it that people need to change, or is it that the environments need to update?
Oh, 1,000% the environments need to change, I think. And like you're saying, I think difference is great. It should be encouraged. It's ridiculous to sort of, I don't care if someone has a different opinion to me as well. This actually makes it interesting. But as long as there's no
It's called
judgment
conversation.
and no judgment, there should be a curiosity where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
you know what, even if I don't, and I've learned so much like this in business. I mean, I'm naturally creative, so I find it really hard in business, or I failed a lot in business in the past because I couldn't manage things and wasn't logistical, and only wanted to be creative. And I've got a lot of friends who are just hardcore boom, business, no emotion attached to it, and I used to judge it a bit. I'd be like, oh, but they're so different, I don't agree. But then I started to really listen and learn from their perspective, and it helped me to change some of my own understanding of certain things. And I think on both ends we can all learn and teach each other. And same as like what you're saying, schooling, I think it's absolute madness that we're still using such an archaic system that was created so long ago. It's not, and why the hell are there not like actual embedded emotional learning subjects?
Yeah.
Like what's more important? Like you go and learn mathematics, English, all these different things, but you don't get taught about something that is going to literally affect every moment of your life. And
Yeah.
and you have to go and learn the hard way. And then some people, like go down an incredibly negative path because of that. So it's like it's nuts. And I think that's the problem. It's not that there's a problem with people, it's the system, it's society, it's the conversation, it's things that are projected onto us. Another example from my own life, I guess, like I I can't not live life the way I want to, because it's just so strong in me. But even to this day, I feel a huge amount of shame and anxiety from how I'm living my life, because again, with my parents, they don't get it. They're like, but why would you want to live in New York? Why don't you want to be in Melbourne? The whole family's here. And not saying it again from a place of, they're doing it from love, from their own understanding, but it causes that anxiety, because you're like, well, I know how I want to live, but I don't want to have to feel this way. And why can't can we talk about it properly? But then a lot of people can only talk about it from their own, level of awareness, I guess. And so then that can be hard, because you got to think, okay, you know what, I'm going to have to just go and find, I'm going to have to just communicate the best I can to those people, but still live how I want to live.
Yeah. I mean, it's that
difficult.
pressure of why, isn't it? Why is a difficult one. I prefer what. Whenever I'm coaching, I like to ask what instead of why, because why, most of the time, really, honestly, people don't know why. And it just sends them into this frantic. Yeah, exactly. And there's this frantic anxiety that comes for the search of why, But I mean,
yeah.
I heard this quote the other day, and it was judgment is their confession of character. And I thought, I love that, because it is, and we all do it. But what I really love there, when you use the word judgment and curiosity in the same sentence, and I don't know if I've ever heard anyone say that, because that's almost the antidote to judgment, isn't it? It's that curiosity, because that's what people don't do when they judge. They're judging without, most of the time, any questions being asked. They got no context. They're just making a judgment. Oh, that person did this, so this person is similar, they must be doing the same thing. And that's where the judgment comes. And I think that's brilliant, like saying curiosity against judgment. I like that a lot.
Massive. Yeah, no, and it's such an interesting thing I got to write down what you're saying with that, because that, thinking of it in the way that you were just saying there, I think of not why but what. I think that's so relevant, because I realize so much of my anxiety that I've had and still have now, it's been my biggest issue, has been from other people asking me, but why, and then I felt rushed. And when I was overseas, like, I've got to quickly make sure that it all works so well so quickly.
Absolutely.
Because as soon as I go home, I'm getting drilled with questions. Okay, when are you moving back? Why are you going to stay there? What are you doing? Okay, are you done now? It's like, well, I don't know. I know, all I know is I want to keep going.
Stresses me out hearing all that.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, like, but and I don't want to need to justify it. Or if it doesn't work, they can say, well, I told you so. It's like, well, no, it's not about, like, there's many levels of how something works, and I don't know. Anyway,
well, think of it like this, right? If you're anxious and I say to you, why are you anxious? That is sure to make you more anxious, because you don't know why you're anxious. If I ask you what's making you anxious, that's a different question. You'd be like, what's making me anxious? Oh, I've got this presentation coming up. Right. Okay. What about your presentation is making you anxious? Keep asking what, and you'll get to an answer at some point. You'll have to, because I'm a believer solely. My coaching style is simple. You have the answers. I know nothing. You are going to educate me. I'm going to reflect it back to you to a point when you can't deny it. You've got the answer. And it's mostly, I find somebody is scared of something. Fear comes into the room. Fear will stop you dead. Scared stiff. That's the reason why yeah, exactly. And that fear will keep you in the same place. Absolutely will. And most of the time, the reason people can't move forward, I've found, and myself included, is because I'm scared of what's come, either scared of the unknown, or maybe I'm scared of the known, and I don't want to move forward towards it because I'm scared. And that scared then leads me to realize that actually I don't know what's going to happen after that. I think I'll just stay here. It all just seems so hard and stressful that you just end up staying exactly where you are, right?
Exactly. And sorry, I was just writing down so I don't forget the what, not why, because it's such a simple way. So I love that one that you've said there. So I'm going to focus on that. But that's the crazy thing when you're doing, the fear, and even if you remove all outside influence, it can be like, when I was first moving overseas, I was terrified beyond belief. And that's before anyone, put anything in my head. But then you identify, okay, I know I want to do this. I've wanted to for so long. I can't ignore it. I've got to do it. And so I'm like, I'm going to do it. But then once the decision's made, there's all this then unsolicited advice getting thrown at you. Not even when you ask someone, you go talk to a family friend, your parents, blah, blah, blah. Why are you going there though, Nick? Like, you've built for 10 years a
That's all their
profile.
fears. That's their fears. They love to pass them on to you.
And they're drilling it onto you. Why are you doing this? You've worked so hard to build this business and profile in Australia. You're going to throw that all away. Don't do it. You're too old. This is crazy. Do not do it. You'll ruin your life. And it's like, hey, I actually didn't even ask for your advice. Like, if you want to say something, just at least don't be negative. You don't have to be supportive. Just please don't be negative towards, a decision I've made for myself. And there's another example I had that I sort of always think back on, where it was this was when I very first wanted to get into acting, and I'd sort of known for a while I wanted to do it, but I was too afraid to do it, or felt, ashamed or embarrassed, or, I'm not naturally going to be good and people are going to judge me and blah, blah, blah. And I finally decided to do it. And this manager took me on and he put me into his full-time program. And I was at dinner with a family friend, and he's actually a TV producer in Australia. And he sat down next to me and, again, unsolicited, spent an hour saying, Nick, I'm in the industry. You're not going to succeed in acting. I don't think you should do it. And I'm thinking, hang on, I didn't ask for your advice on this. And I kept saying, I'm like, look, I'm really sorry. Like, I've got my own reason. I don't know how it'll go, but I know why I'm doing it. And it's fine, and he just kept pushing, and then saying, we should have a meeting with your dad and you shouldn't do this. And anyway, like, so still went ahead and did it, whatever. And about 3 years after that, I got the role on Neighbours, and they sort of did a bit of media in Australia about it. And we're at a family event, and he was there, and he runs up to me, and he's read about it in the media, and he's saying, that's so fantastic. You got this role on Neighbours. What's it like? How is it? Blah, blah, blah. And I kind of wish I did say something, but I was biting my lip, and I'm just like thinking, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, do you not remember what you said to me? But it made me more ambitious than ever and more motivated in the stuff that we're doing with these kind of conversations. And again, like we were talking about earlier, about how can I have as much influence as possible? I want to be able to get these messages out to as many people as possible, because it makes me actually really upset to know how many people would have, thrown away their dreams because of these fears. Because it was probably a tightrope for me, and I could have easily gone the other way, and luckily I pushed through and have followed through on these things. But I can see how easily people give up on what they really want to do. And, living your life suppressed like that is really sad. And, I don't want people to do that.
Well, it's the roots of depression, isn't it? That sort of stuff. I mean, that just speaks to your incredible character, mate. I mean, to be able that's someone who's in the industry telling you you're not going to do that. I mean, that's amazing. That really is. That's giving me goosebumps, in fact, because like to be able to have a conversation like that and just stand up for yourself and then not throw it in their face afterwards, mate. Well done.
Appreciate it. I kind of wish I did say something to him, but probably not.
Yeah. I get that. Fair play to you, though. Fair play. I mean, do you think, like, speaking about that, like I said, it's like that's like the installation of insecurity and depression right there. Someone's trying to they were literally forcing it on you, unsolicited. Do you think it's possible to gain awareness and forecast sort of like that mental health challenge that's coming before it becomes an actual problem?
So from their perspective,
from yourself? I mean, like, I don't know whether you did that, or like, you had no idea that you were going to get that job on Neighbours, but I gather, much like me, you've got that inbuilt, not self-belief as such, because I'm sure you question yourself all the time, but you want it so bad that you're not going to give up. You're going to have that feeling. So, but that sort of, like you say, I've come to New York, and why is my podcast not doing what I want it to do yet, and all those sort of things. That there is like, it's a potential mental health crisis in the making, isn't it? Like, especially for people like you and I, who will sit there and overthink it deliberately almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think you can forecast it a little bit? Do you think you can because I don't know if you've ever read the book. I'm trying to remember what it's called now. I'm gonna not remember, aren't I? Insight. It's called Insight. I'll try and remember and text you or message you.
Insight, yeah.
Insight. But she talks about in there how they learned how to stop rumination. And one of the things I've had a lot of issues with rumination. I look at it like picking the wound and not letting it heal, sort of thing. But one of the things that they suggest in the book is, and I did this the other day, I was driving, I started drifting off thinking about something, ruminating about something. And what they suggest you do is just shout as loud as you can, stop. And I tell you what, straight after I shouted stop, I started laughing. But I tell you what I wasn't doing, I wasn't ruminating anymore. You
can't in that. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I literally did shout. So I don't know if that's one to use in the supermarket, but it helped in the car. But I mean, going back to the question, do you think you can sort of gain that awareness before and put those tools in place to say, like, I'm not going to follow this train of thinking?
Absolutely. I think, I think it's some of it, like, it's like, I think I've naturally had this inbuilt resilience because I've just wanted to do certain things so badly.
Yeah, great.
But what I haven't had or haven't been good with is the ups and downs and the doubting and blah, blah, blah. But even within that, underneath that and the sort of emotional chaos that can happen on, still on a daily basis, deeply underneath, I know that no matter how crazy I'm going or whether I'm being catastrophic or thinking, things are all going to fail, I know that I just won't give up and I will find a way. There's that inbuilt thing. And I think that comes from some of that's natural, but some of it you can cultivate. And I think for me, it was, went all the way back to when I started to get myself back on track and had to go and do the public speaking at university. And learning from that, I kept referring back to that. And then the second sort of thing that consolidated that for me was when I was on Dancing with the Stars, and I was the most scared I've ever been in my life.
I bet.
I wouldn't even go and dance, when I was out with friends, and I was still dealing with all this stuff, and I was, having to dance in a live TV, 3 million people watching it live. You've got a live audience there, and I was terrified, and I sort of didn't, it wasn't great, but I got through it, and it sort of again taught me, okay, we don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to know how something's going to play out. And we're never going to be the best at the beginning. So the only thing we can actually control is putting one foot in front of the other and just keep going. And that gave me a lot of peace because I realized, okay, that's kind of exciting because it actually means if someone else has achieved these things that I'm aiming for, it means that it theoretically is possible. And I can make a decision myself, no one else, but I can make the decision if I want to try and do it or not. And then once I've made that, I think it's making that commitment that I'm going to, one way or another, find a way to do it and not being rigid in, how it's going to happen. And I'm always refining this process, but for me, it's become, how do I, because I get overwhelmed, and I'm sure you probably got a similar thing if you think the same way, where I'll be thinking so far ahead, wanting everything at once, trying to take on too much. Then in a given day, how do I do everything? So I started to learn to refine things and think, okay, well, how can I actually regiment this? How can I work out the big goals, break them down into weeks, into days? Today, even if there's 3 different main things I'm working on at the moment, what are the key things I can do today that are non-negotiable to push me forward? And if something else outside of that happens or I have more time, fine, but I'm not going to put that pressure. And the funny thing is, like, when you remove the pressure, you actually end up, fast tracking your sort of growth quite dramatically, because the hard thing is just the first step. So when you're ruminating and saying, "Oh no, I need to do all these things," you're so overwhelmed you don't start. But if you can remove all that, I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I do know today, if I even just send one email, that's going to be better than doing nothing. And normally once I've sent the one email, I'll send another 10. So it's that kind of thinking, I think, that really helps with that kind of thing.
I mean, what I hugely respect about, like, just the stuff I've learned about you today is that you are a succession of putting yourselves in situations where you have to try. You have to. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine how terrifying Dancing with the Stars was. I just can't. To me, that is all of my worst nightmares in one little part. Like, that must have been so difficult, like, to do that, like, with no experience of dancing or anything like that. So you kind of, I don't know whether you thought you'd be successful or not, but you certainly gave it everything you had. You tried, and everything you've told me today. You've put yourself in that situation. Like, I've got to do this speech. I've got to do this. Now I'm in America. I have to do this too. I have to do that. And it's just, I think that's the answer to that question, isn't it? It's that putting yourself in situations that you got to try, and that's what you do, I think.
And I think the other part of the answer is realizing that, life isn't meant to be easy, and actually it's part of life to be uncomfortable. So we're going to be uncomfortable no matter what. So accept that it's not going to, always feel good or always be easy. And we're going to have days when we don't want to do it, days where we doubt ourselves and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't matter. We can work on that stuff. We can't 100% remove it, but we can accept it and we can just push forward. And, it removes a lot of these barriers of trying to create this perfect environment all the time. That's just not going to happen. We can't control so many things.
Yeah, and that's it. We sort of create this illusion of control that gives us comfort, but we forget that it's an illusion. We just completely forget that it's an illusion. It's, oh yeah, I've bought my own bullshit here. But I remember a really long time ago when I was 16. Unfortunately, I come from a background of domestic violence and physical abuse as a child, and I had to leave the family home really early. And I remember getting loads of jobs and still not having enough money to survive. And I remember walking down this alley back really late at night from a job, crying. I was crying because I didn't know what I was going to do. I literally thought, this is it. Like, I've got all these jobs. I've got no more time. I've got no more options. And I'm not saying I was suicidal, but I was having some dark thoughts, and I really wanted to give up. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to give up, and I was crying, and I walked around this corner, and do you know what happened? Saw £20 on the floor, which was just enough money for me to get gas because I was on a gas meter. And I think about that moment all the time, because I think to myself, you never know if you do decide to give up, whether it's the moment before you were about to get what was needed, And I think about that all the time. I think to myself, whenever I'm going to give up, I'm thinking, well, what if you walk around the corner, there's 20 quid, Not literally, but proverbially. Like, I think, what if that happens? And I think that's it. You just got to keep finding those reasons, haven't you? Just to keep plowing forward and just to keep trying.
Yeah, I really love that story, mate. It's super inspiring, and just learning that, part about your story and to where you are now. It's pretty amazing. And I think that message is so inspiring, and I think it is. It's like, all we can do is try our best, and we have a vision, we can work towards it, but we don't know. And 100% in acting, every big actor I've listened to, the one thing they always say is, there's only one thing you can actually do. Like, their main advice is, if you want to succeed in it, just don't quit. Because you can't really control much else, and you don't know. No one has a silver ball. But if you quit, you're 100% not going to get there. And I think also, like, there's a lot of motivational speakers out there that will just say, you got to push harder, you got to grind, you got to do this, and it's like, well, it's great to have some motivation, but no one can really do that all day, every day. And we might have weeks or months where we're not very motivated, we're struggling, and we get barely anything done. But as long as you're still staying true to yourself and, not giving up, then momentum will eventually change. So I think it's being okay, not being so hard on ourselves. That, okay, what? I'm only human. I can't do it right now. I need to deal with some other things, but not giving up. And I found, that's helped me a lot, because I'll sort of, if I don't see enough progress on a weekly basis, often I'll feel like it's all falling apart. And it's not how it works. Things are cyclical and they can change, and you just gotta stay in there and not try and put so much pressure on yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, absolutely right. It's the only absolute definite way to fail is just to quit. And sometimes, and you're allowed to feel like quitting. You're absolutely allowed to feel like quitting. You're allowed to have a cry. You're allowed to go and punch a wall. You're allowed to do whatever you want. Just don't quit. Just don't quit. Go to bed. Most of the time as well, we're either hungry, tired, or something at that time, aren't we? We make these massive life decisions like 11:30 at night, which is late for me. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
You won't catch me up late. I'm an early riser, but I go to bed early too. But
Yeah.
I mean, based on some of the things you've said, I mean, obviously you've talked a lot about awareness in there, like bringing awareness to things, and I agree with you, and I think that's definitely the first part of changing anything, isn't it? Is becoming aware of it. But I think a close second is taking accountability for what you can in a situation. I mean, I often believe there's only two things you can really control, and that is your attitude and your effort. That they are the only real things that you've got absolute control over. But I mean, how do you feel that people can take accountability? What's the best way? Not responsibility, because sometimes people pile too much responsibility on themselves, but taking accountability for what you can. How can people do that, do you think?
Well, I think, yeah, exactly. I agree completely with what you're saying there. And I think really taking accountability in the sense of often, and I've done this a lot in the past, where you sort of go into a victim mentality. It's not fair. Why are things so hard for me? I need help. Like I don't have enough people supporting me. I if only I had this or this, then I could maybe do this. And we'll seek other people's, advice or try and look for outside support. And you waste so much time doing that, and it creates that negative mindset. And what's made me snap out of it was that accountability thing of thinking, okay, you know what, though, like, do I want to spend this time talking to someone about this and complaining and voicing my frustration, or do I want to just actually roll up my sleeves and just do it myself, just do whatever I can? It might be, I don't know, like it was, I guess, starting the podcast was even an example. Like I didn't know what I was doing, and I was like, I don't want to do it because I don't know how to do it, and I didn't have an editor at the time, and I was just like, fuck it, I'm just going to learn how to do it. Just did the whole thing myself, learned how to edit, blah blah blah, and it was a bit clumsy at the beginning, but then after the first 5-10 weeks, I was like, wow, I feel great. My self-esteem's gone up because I just actually did the thing. I didn't wait for someone to tell me when I should or shouldn't do it. So I think, like, I used to have a lot of people around me that would cast a lot of fear into me and be saying, oh, but what if you, again, for an example, with the podcast, of putting some content out in the world, especially coming from the TV industry, I had sort of people that I felt like had my best interest at heart, but they'd be saying, oh, you're going to ruin your career if you do this, or if you say this one word wrong, or blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, fuck, I can't fucking be myself and voice my opinion or, be authentic if I'm terrified about slipping up or doing something wrong. I know that I'm going to be doing it in my own way and, for the right reasons. But so when I just cut that out and ignored it, and I, stopped just not only not seeking their approval, but just not even telling them. And then if I did put something out there and they said something to me that was negative, I'd just either, say thank you for the advice and ignore it, or just not reply. And, that really helped, because yes, we should obviously, be seeking to improve and getting other people's opinions in that we know really have our back and want us to grow. But I think having too many opinions and too many people giving you advice from different angles, that can just lead to not moving forward at all, because you'll be too scared to do anything. Yeah, confusion.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I'm sure you'll find this good, but podcast is like the perfect antagonist for like a perfectionist, because there's so much stuff that could go utterly wrong, right? Like I've got a friend who's a podcaster, and she finally got this guest on that she'd been trying to get on for a really long time. She was really excited about it, so excited that she started a conversation and forgot to press record. And I just, when I heard that, I was like, oh man, that is,
oh no,
this is a really busy person that they were speaking to. They were very lucky to get them on it. And I just, my heart broke for her. I was like, oh, that is terrible. Luckily the person was really, really cool and enjoyed the conversation so much that they were happy to come back. But as a perfectionist, that's the kind of thing that you wake up in the night thinking about.
Exactly.
You really do.
Exactly.
You really do.
Exactly.
But yeah, I love all of that, them examples there of taking accountability, because it is true. I think you've got to be able to know where your point of influence ends. It's like social media is perfect for it. You can sit and you can curate an amazing video with loads of knowledge, loads of wisdom, loads of stuff, be really excited about it. But once you've hit post, there is nothing more you can do. But yet you will keep picking up the phone and looking at it as if that is going to make it happen. So it's funny, isn't it? Like, we know these things, but they catch us out.
Exactly. We can't control that. We can just put our best foot forward and then move on, not have to. Yeah, we sort of do. We will put so much effort and then get frustrated when it's not the outcome we want, or all sorts of things. But really all we can do is just in that moment, with the knowledge or the skills we have, put our best, foot forward in the world, and then learn from that and move forward and just keep doing it. And we can't really do much else.
That's right. Yeah, I couldn't have said it about myself, mate, to be honest. But I mean, I've heard you say quite a lot about how you can use your personal challenges as motivators. Can you explain, like, to people that might not understand that idea, because it does sound like difficult, right? So how can that happen? How do you do that?
I'm a huge believer in that, and I think everything does happen for a reason, and we can, learn from things and advance forward, or not. We can either become a victim, or we can go and use it to grow. And if I look back on my own life, like, I really wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't make some of the same mistakes again. I think that's a mistake if you don't learn from it. But it's formed who I am, and I think we often try and avoid discomfort, avoid pain, and our parents will often do that, or people around us at school will get sort of sheltered because as a way of protecting. But I think that's not within reason. It's not a good thing, because we need to experience things. We need to fall flat on our face. We need to be humbled. We need to you learn so much more from failing than just getting the outcome you want. So yeah, I guess my theory, or my thinking on that is, it would actually be a negative thing if you just got what you want all the time, and you set out, you had a dream, and you finished school and it just happened for you. Because I think something's probably, you're not going to really know who you are. You're probably not going to be able to maintain it and have sustainability if you don't have that happen, and you won't know who you are. So I think you learn who you are by going through really challenging, difficult things. And I was, it was part of my depression. I was incredibly sheltered, some by my own choosing, because I was so shy and so, terrified of the world, and some from the environment I'd grown up in. I was in this political family where, you're paranoid that if you say one word wrong, it could end up in the media. So you just sheltered. And that all, that delayed my growth as a person, and it made me depressed. And it wasn't till I started having these really painful, difficult things happen, and then trying to pull myself out of it, and, have that happen over and over again, that I learned that. But I think, the most simple way to look at it is, if anything you're trying to do, there's two main outcomes that are going to happen. You're either going to actually, if you've got this vision, it's either going to happen or it's not. And if it doesn't, then I think look at that as actually the better outcome, because the second one, and it's not, I don't like the word failure, but because it's learning. Look at it as learning. If things don't work out, this is an opportunity for me to learn, which is actually going to be more valuable for me long term than just getting my way. Yeah. And then how can we go wrong then? Every day, what's there to be afraid of if it's actually going to be a positive thing for us to not get our own way?
Yeah, I remember this experience I had when I was helping some people plant some trees, and some of the trees, they use these stakes, to support them, to keep them upright, and they have to remember to take them off, right? Because at the beginning, when they're first planted, they're not strong enough to look after themselves. But the thing that I noticed is that the ones where the stakes were left on didn't survive when they were taken off, because they'd relied on this stake the whole time. They'd never been at the mercy of the wind and the weather and the rain and all that different things. So they'd never learned how to become a strong tree. And I often think about that as like an analogy, right? Like if we don't expose ourselves to uncomfortable conditions, we don't learn how to be strong when they come along again, right? So when them stakes were taken out for some of those trees, a week later they were like this, because they were like, what is going on? This is too much, but
totally.
I find it really intriguing, that you come from this well-known family, and I can only imagine, and I've heard you mention it a few times, that that was hard, man. That must have been so difficult. I mean, coming out of that sort of place, and having that pressure of, like you said, even then you didn't even get to be Nick, right? You were your dad's son, like you said it at the beginning, and that must have been hard
Yeah.
in itself. So talk about that. I mean, what did you learn from that experience? How did you move forward from that? And again, it must be super hard as well when your dad's giving you advice that potentially you wasn't helpful or whatever, or not intentionally, but that's what we do. I'm a dad, and I sometimes through fear tell my kids that, maybe you shouldn't do this, and then I start going, that sounds like your thing, Johnny.
Yeah.
But how
Yeah.
was that experience for you? What did you learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, it was, really difficult, I guess, in that sense of feeling like I didn't have my own identity and putting pressure on myself, thinking, okay, what do I have to do um, to be known as Nick Bracks, not Steve Bracks? And it sort of initially, early on, drove me, in really negative way. Like I was doing things for the wrong reason, and I guess when I was in my early 20s and doing the modeling stuff, and then I was on reality television shows, I was thinking, okay, how do I get so famous that people know me more than my dad? And then, and it was like all for the wrong reasons. And it sort of led to that kind of thinking. And it actually is what initially even got me into the acting, which, I'm open about. And I'm so glad, again, going back to, things happening for a reason, I wouldn't change any of that because it got me into it. And then I like learned and grew and realized, okay, this is so different to what I've thought, and it was self-development. And I wouldn't have gone into it for that reason, but it led to all these negative behavior patterns and thinking, like, how do I prove myself I'm not enough? And to be honest, to this day, it's still a thing that's not as prominent, but it's still in my head, thinking, okay, well, am I happy with what I've done? Well, not really, because if I compare it to my dad being this prominent politician, have I outdone him yet, or have I at least equaled what he did? If if I was back in Melbourne and two people saw us, would they think that I've done as something as significant? And I don't know why I feel it so severely, but it's probably because I'm competitive as well. But
You want them to say, "Oh, look, there's Nick's dad."
yeah, exactly. That's what you want. But which is fine to be ambitious like that, but within reason, and also, not taking it out of control where it's like, you can't compare two separate people's lives and, with anyone, but it created that kind of thinking. And, I had to really be careful about monitoring that. And I think, leaving Australia was something I wanted to do for a long time, because it becomes, you grow up in this one environment. And I probably feel like where I grew up in Melbourne, I probably had some trauma with being in that city, because I just was too many years of living in this shadow, in this environment, everyone in that city knowing who the family was. And then from my own stuff that happened. And, when I had the car crash, it was around the time he was standing down, and people saying, you've ruined your dad's career and blah, blah, blah.
That's
And,
a lot,
I knew,
mate. That's
which
a
I knew
lot.
wasn't. Yeah, I mean, I knew it wasn't true. I'm close with my
Yeah.
dad, and he's, communicated to me. But
Yeah.
hearing, you're having to deal with this public stuff, and yeah, it is a lot at that kind of age, I guess, to deal with. So it's, but it also, I think, accelerated my, I've probably naturally been a pretty inquisitive, deep thinking kind of person, and it just accelerated that side of my development, because I was feeling so much trauma and difficulty from all these things at such a young age. I had to just completely question everything and, go reach such a low point and, just evaluate and analyze and try and find what do I actually want out of life. So it probably is a gift in that way as well, where it accelerated that. And also a gift in the sense of like, even though it's a little bit unhealthy, in the ambition of, okay, you know what? I saw my dad, I grew up with my dad doing this thing, coming from a working class family and becoming the leader of Victoria in politics. No matter what endeavor I set out to do, I don't give a shit what the odds are or whatever anyone else says, because I have this innate thing where I'm like, well, I saw my dad do this thing, and I know my dad, and I know if he could do that, I can as well. So it's sort of, I think there's a gift in it as well. But yeah, and it's a universal thing. I think a lot of people have, in different ways, a difficulty with trying to, expectation, feeling like the inadequate compared to, and not just parents. It could be your best friend, your brother, your sister, anyone like who has excelled in their field, you can easily then, feel inadequate yourself and that you need to do more.
I always say it to people: just because they're doing well doesn't mean you're not. There's a
Exactly.
distinct difference between those two things. But yeah, we go
And
on
how do you
Instagram.
measure it?
Yeah, exactly.
How do you measure? Yeah.
Yeah, and you go on Instagram and you see, like I remember during the pandemic, right? The first part of the pandemic, when we had the first lockdown, it was sunshine. Yeah, everyone thought it was only going to be a couple of weeks. So everyone was enjoying themselves and having a nice time. But when we got to lockdown 2, lockdown 3, started struggling with homeschooling, started struggling with being all in the same environment together for such a long period of time, and so on and so on. But after a little while, you start to realize that you have to start making decisions moving forward about I've lost my way with that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Totally forgot what I was going to say. But but what I will say is that you are remarkable. You are remarkable. Some of the things that you've learned from some really quite uncomfortable situations, I think, are amazing. And I what I would really hope for you, even just meeting you, is that you are proud of yourself, because you should be. Yeah, I really do think you should be. You've achieved so much. And you spoke about your mentor. You said he's 70 years old, and they're the people you learn from, because they realize that when they get to 70, that some of that stuff that's happening around our age, your age, whatever, doesn't matter.
It doesn't. Exactly. It's
None
like
of that matters.
and it's so easy to get caught up in, because like you're saying, and I appreciate it, but I'll often, I'll be like, no, fuck this, I've like, why I want to be, making my own TV shows and films and acting and, doing these huge things. And I'm, a piece of shit because I haven't got there yet. And I'm 35 now. But it's like, well, how long's a piece of string? And, you got to look at your life as a whole. And whenever I do that, I'm thinking, okay, but I've actually had this career in acting, but I've also done this and this and helped these people. And it's so easy to fall into that. And when I came to New York, a lot of my friends here have gone down the path of just, starting tech companies and finance and business, and some making, millions upon millions of dollars. And I would be hanging out with them and thinking, Nick, you're a fucking piece of shit, because these guys, have like made, because I'm comparing just the financial component, which they've dedicated their entire freaking life to, just that. They've grinded just on one thing. And I'm saying, well, in my business, why aren't I beating them in that area? And then it's like, hang on, come on. Like, you got to look at, if I look at it as a whole, I'm like, actually, you know what? It's not a competition and I'm doing my own thing, and you can't compare it, but it is very easy in different, sections of our lives to just compartmentalize and compare and tell ourselves we're not enough, when, it's not as simplistic as that.
No, that's it. Sometimes we compare things that shouldn't be compared together. They're not the same. I remember what I was going to say now, and this is a great test of perfectionism, right? Will I leave this in the episode? But when I remember 2 or 3 lockdowns in, I'm on Instagram, and somebody I know in the fitness industry was paddleboarding in the Maldives. At that time, I was struggling with all of those things, homeschooling, being in a house with the family all that time, and many other things. And it's so easy in that moment to go, my life sucks.
Yeah.
Look at this dude out here paddleboarding. Look at all his family, all happy and out in the Maldives. Why am I not in the Maldives? Because I'm a loser, right? But just because he's out in the Maldives and his family's out in the Maldives, and there's all these pictures that make it look a certain way online, that doesn't mean that my life's rubbish. I'm having a bad day. I'm not having a bad life. But in that moment, it's really easy to grab onto that. That's what I was trying to say before I just completely lost my way. No,
I have that happen all the time where it comes back, but it's such a good point.
But it can happen at any level, can't it?
It can happen at any level, and we can compare anything. And then also on the flip side, I've been, fortunate enough, I guess, when I was in the entertainment industry, you get invited to these, crazy parties, or you go traveling somewhere, and I've seen like some of those people that I would be looking at thinking, what the hell, they got the best life ever. And when you're actually there and watching the interactions and the actual behind the scenes, you're like, hang on, this person actually, this isn't what it seemed. And actually, what I almost miss, just being with my, close mates and talking shit and, doing simple things, like, it makes you realize that's absolutely not the answer, and it's never what it looks like on Instagram or
No.
that kind of thing.
Do you know how I know that it's not right? I was at this really amazing beach bar where we live, right? And I watched this couple walk in to meet their family at a table just over the way. And this couple walked in and they were like Mr. and Mrs. Perfect, right? They looked exactly as the, just spot on, makeup done, and he was all jacked up and all this sort of stuff. And it was just like, my wife was looking at her, I was looking at him thinking, man, Anyway, they're having dinner with their family and thing. And the girl, and this doesn't make her a bad person, it's just what happened. She took the child that was there, the little baby, and she did a big posing picture, which you can imagine probably going on Instagram later. And as soon as that camera was down, she just handed the baby back. And I thought, when you see that picture online, she's gonna probably put some caption on saying, "Oh, here with my little nephew, I just love her," or whatever. And again, doesn't make her a bad person, but it just shows you that's not real, is it?
It's such a great example. It's such a good example. Exactly. It really
it's just
does.
not
It really
real,
does.
That's like I said, I want to make it really clear that I'm not saying that person's a bad person. I'm saying that
Yeah.
isn't a real situation. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But that situation will probably go on to make a good few hundred people feel bad about themselves, which is a real shame.
It's so true, and it's just a symptom of the world. Yeah, like you said,
Oh,
it's not her fault. It's a
no.
symptom of the world that we live in now, and it's like,
Mm,
there is no perfect situation, because
no.
even if you do achieve your wildest dreams, we can't do everything. So there's
No.
always going to be, something else that we could do, someone doing something that we haven't done. It's,
Yeah.
but it's just now all under a microscope where we're looking at all these things where, it's so unhealthy. It's like our brain's not meant to be looking and comparing to so many things.
No, we're not. I can't remember. I think it's Jay Shetty said, what would you do if you woke up in the morning and there was 100 people in your bedroom? You'd freak
Yeah.
out, right? All talking at you,
Yeah.
all giving you their opinions, all saying what they think. Well, that's what we do with social media. We wake up
Yeah.
in the morning and we turn on social media and we get 1,000 opinions thrown at us all at once. You're absolutely right. We are not
Yeah.
equipped for that. Like, that is not normal. That is going to definitely cause mental illness. But anyway, I've
No.
taken up so much of your time today, but I just wanted to ask one question before you go. Do you have anything that you have found valuable that you would like to pass on to everybody about self-development?
I mean, so many things, but I would say, a lot of what we touched on today, I think, a lot of the things that I've really picked up, but I would say really just at the core of it, understanding, at a really deep level that you actually already are enough.
Mm.
And, it sounds simple, but it's not, and it can take a lifetime to really, really embrace that and realize that. But you are, and you don't have to, like, no matter what we do or achieve or project to the outside world, it's not going to make us any more worthy. We already are. And, so I'd say that. And then I'd say just not having to, like what we talked about, not having to listen to and believe everything everyone tells you, trusting yourself, and realizing there's no right or wrong way to go about life. And just listen to your gut, I think, is so important. And I think everyone knows what it feels like when your gut tells you something, but we can often ignore it. So you should never ignore it. You should listen to it. And like what you said, even if it logically might not be if it's not the most logical move forward, if your gut's really, eating away at you saying you should do this, there's a deep, feeling and reason to do it, then do it, try it, fall flat on your face and, at least do something that you want to
Get
do.
that learning you spoke about. I mean, sometimes that gut is not trying to give you the answer, it's just trying to give you another piece of the puzzle. So you don't have to actually do what your gut is telling you. You just have to listen. Just have to listen and go, what am I feeling here? What's happening? What's happening here? What's this feeling? I'm uncomfortable about this. What's making me uncomfortable? And trying to get to the bottom of what's going on. It might not be the answer, but it might be a little part of the puzzle that gets you along a bit further. I agree with you. Absolutely. Listen, mate, you're a legend. Absolute legend. I'm so grateful for your time. And I just want to give you the chance to tell people what's next for you, to draw any attention to any projects you've got coming up, and to just tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, no, mate, I've really enjoyed the conversation and, love to stay in touch, and thanks for having me on. And for me, I'm building Move Your Mind, which I guess like we're expanding the business at the moment. We're building it into an app. We're growing the programs, the podcast and all that side of things, which any of that can be found at either moveyourmind.me or nickbracks.com has links to all of that. And the same for everything else I'm doing. All my, my podcast, it's nickbracks.com/podcast, has all the links, and social media, Instagrams, just Nick Bracks for all of them actually. So that, that's the main thing I'm working on. And then in the entertainment side of things, I've been working on a TV, like a pilot TV show for the last year or so, and sort of gradually chipping away at that, and it's centered around mental health. So that's sort of been a fun project to do, and something that I'm gradually progressing with.
Oh mate, I tell you what, I say it to a lot of guests actually, but like I'm so lucky I get to speak to people that are just doing the right thing. They're doing what they're supposed to do, and that's what you're doing, man. What you're doing is what you're supposed to be doing, because you're really good at it. So good for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, mate. No, I've really enjoyed chatting to you, though. I think I genuinely love these conversations, and I think it's very like-minded what we're talking about, and there's nothing more enjoyable than just having these kind of chats.
Absolutely. Neither of us will suffer from philosophical loneliness today.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Nick, thank you so much, mate.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it.